The grand ballroom at the Metropolitan Hotel buzzed with anticipation. 70 beautiful women, each in a custom wedding gown, stood perfectly still, their faces serene, their gazes fixed forward. They were more than brides today. They were contestants in a ruthless game, their futures hanging on the decision of one man. The heir to the Korean Mafia, Jihoon Kim, the son of the feared patriarch of one of the most powerful crime families in the world. But Jihoon wasn't standing at the altar, preparing to exchange vows. No, Jihoon was at the back of the room, dressed in a crisp black suit, his hands trembling in his pockets. His eyes, cold as ice, scanned a room filled with perfectly poised women. His heart, however, wasn't in it. He didn't want to be here. This wasn't a wedding. This was a transaction. Jihoon's father, the powerful patriarch, had arranged this spectacle as a final power move before stepping down from the family business. His plan was simple: marry Jihoon off to one of these women, securing an alliance with one of the wealthiest families in Korea. A perfect union of power, money, and influence. The families waited with bated breath, knowing that their daughter's future depended on this one decision. But Jihoon couldn't bring himself to choose. He'd looked at their profiles, beautiful faces, impressive pedigrees, connections to the right people. But it was all fake. No depth. No real connection. Just appearances. He couldn't marry someone like that. Not now. Not ever. His best friend, Hoon, stood by his side, watching Jihoon in disbelief. "You can't just leave, Jihoon," Hoon said, grabbing his arm. "Your father will destroy you. These families, they'll go to war. You're the heir. This is your duty." Jihoon pulled his arm away, his gaze steady. "Let them. I'm done." He turned on his heel, pushing through the crowd of 70 brides, each one hopeful, each one already imagining a life by his side. But Jihoon didn't care about their hopes. He didn't care about his father's empire. He didn't care about anything but freedom. He stepped out of the ballroom and into the cold night air, the chaos behind him. His footsteps echoed in the empty hallway, and his heart felt lighter with every step. He walked outside, hailed a cab, and ordered the driver to take him anywhere but here. "Where to, sir?" the driver asked. "Just drive," Jihoon muttered, leaning back in the seat. The streets blurred outside, the city lights flickering as they passed. Jihoon didn't know where he was headed. He just wanted to run. Run from the family legacy, from the expectations, from the life his father had planned for him. He didn't want to be the perfect son, the perfect heir anymore. He wanted to be free. The cab finally stopped outside a small diner in the middle of Brooklyn. Jihoon stepped out, looking up at the neon sign. Rosie's Diner. The place looked old, faded. But something about it called to him. It felt real. No glitz, no glamour. Just a small, humble place. He pushed open the door, the bell above it ringing as he walked in. There were only a few patrons, a couple of tired-eyed workers, and a woman behind the counter. She looked at him curiously, her dark skin glowing under the harsh diner lights. Her natural hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and her eyes held a mix of exhaustion and warmth. She was beautiful in a way that didn't require perfection or designer labels. She looked like she belonged here. "The kitchen's about to close," she said in a warm, husky voice. "But I can get you coffee and pie if you're not too picky." Jihoon felt a strange comfort in her directness, her lack of pretension. "Coffee's fine," he said, sitting down at the counter. She didn't ask him how he liked it, just slid a cup of black coffee across to him. The mug had seen better days, the logo faded, but there was something calming about it. Something real. Jihoon took a sip, feeling the warmth seep into him. He didn't know why, but he felt at ease here, in a place far removed from his world of luxury and deception. "Rough night?" she asked, wiping down the counter. Jihoon let out a bitter laugh. "You could say that." "Wedding or funeral?" she asked, nodding at his tuxedo. Jihoon froze, taken aback by her bluntness. Most people would be cautious, polite, maybe even intimidated by his appearance. But not her. She looked at him like she was genuinely interested, like he was a person and not the heir to an empire. "Was supposed to be a wedding," Jihoon admitted. But I left before anyone could say I do. She stopped wiping and looked at him for a moment, her dark eyes studying him with an intensity that made Jihoon feel exposed, like she could see right through him. Then she gave a small, knowing smile. "Good for you," she said, as if leaving his own wedding was the bravest thing he could have done. Jihoon's chest tightened. He had expected judgment, pity, or even curiosity. But not approval. Not this. "I'm Sienna," she said, extending a hand across the counter. "And I've seen a lot of people walk through that door at 2 a.m. running from something. But you're the first one in a tux." "Jihoon," he said, shaking her hand. It felt warm, real. For the first time tonight, he didn't feel like a puppet being pulled by strings. He felt like a man. "Well, Jihoon," she said, pulling her hand back, smiling for real now. "You want to tell me what you're running from, or should I just keep the coffee coming?" Before he could answer, his phone exploded with calls. His father's name flashed over and over, then Hoon, then numbers he didn't recognize. Sienna glanced at the phone, then back at him. "Whoever they are, they can wait," she said, refilling his coffee as if she was giving him permission to exist outside of his obligations, outside of the empire that had always been his life. Jihoon didn't even pick up the phone. He stared at it for a moment, then turned it off, feeling a strange sense of freedom. He hadn't felt free in years. "I was supposed to choose a wife tonight," Jihoon said quietly, his voice raw. "From 70 women I don't know, don't care about. I stood there, looking at them all, and realized I couldn't do it. I couldn't pick someone like I was shopping for a car." Sienna leaned against the counter, studying him with an expression he couldn't read. "So you ran," she said, not asking, but stating it like it was the only logical thing to do. "So I ran," Jihoon confirmed, his voice steady now, the weight of the world on his shoulders, but lighter somehow. Sienna smiled again, and this time, it was like she was proud of him, like he'd done something worthy of admiration. It was simple, but it was the first time he felt like someone saw him for who he truly was, not the heir, not the mafia boss, not the family's perfect son. "I can't believe I'm saying this," Jihoon said, leaning forward. "But I think I needed this. I needed to be away from all of that, away from everything I'm supposed to be." Sienna nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Sometimes, you have to walk away from the life everyone expects for you to find the one you're supposed to live." Jihoon stared at her for a long moment, then nodded, feeling something shift inside of him. But just as he was about to say something more, his phone rang again. And this time, it wasn't just his father. It was a text from Hoon. "They know you're gone. They're coming for you, Jihoon. You need to get out of there." Jihoon looked at Sienna, feeling a chill run down his spine. He had no idea what was coming next, but he knew one thing for sure. His life was never going to be the same again. Subscribe to this channel to support our growth. Jihoon's heart raced as he stared down at his phone, the text from Hoon still glowing on the screen. "They know you're gone. They're coming for you, Jihoon. You need to get out of there." Sienna was still behind the counter, pouring more coffee into a chipped mug. She had no idea what was coming. And for the first time, Jihoon didn't want to involve her. She was just a waitress at a rundown diner in Brooklyn. He didn't want to drag her into his mess, especially not when she had already given him so much. But there was something about Sienna that made Jihoon feel human. He had spent his whole life being the perfect son, the perfect heir, the perfect mask. With her, he felt like he could breathe. She had no expectations of him. No family name to uphold, no crime empire to continue. She was simple, real. And for the first time in his life, Jihoon didn't want to run away from that. He turned his phone off again, but the feeling of impending doom gnawed at him. His father's power and influence stretched far beyond anything Jihoon had ever known. The mafia had eyes everywhere. And now they knew he was gone. They knew he was walking away from everything. Sienna must have noticed the shift in his mood, because she stopped what she was doing and looked up. "You all right?" she asked, her voice soft, but not pitying. There was no judgment in her eyes. Just curiosity. A strange, comforting warmth. Jihoon hesitated. He could tell her everything, lay out his entire life, the dangerous world he was born into, the secrets he had kept locked away in the dark corners of his mind. But he didn't want her to see him as the son of a mafia boss, the heir to a kingdom built on violence and fear. He didn't want her to see him as another powerful man who would try to control her, manipulate her by her love. "No," Jihoon said finally, his voice rough. "I'm not all right." Sienna didn't press him for more. Instead, she just nodded, set down the pot of coffee, and walked over to where he sat. The hum of the diner's flickering lights filled the silence between them. "You know," she said, pulling out the seat across from him, "I've met a lot of guys who thought they could outrun their problems. But they always end up running straight into the same wall. Same story every time." Jihoon looked at her, his heart heavy with the weight of his choices. "And what about you?" he asked. "What's your story?" Sienna smiled, but it wasn't the easy, confident smile she had shown him before. It was the kind of smile that came with experience, the kind of smile that only came after you had learned how to keep your emotions under control, even when the world was falling apart. "My story?" She laughed bitterly. "Well, I came to New York thinking I could make it big. You know, be an actress. The whole American dream thing. But that dream got lost in the waiting rooms and rejection emails. So I ended up here, working 3 jobs, trying to survive." She paused, her eyes darkening. "But I'm still here. Still fighting, even if it doesn't always feel like I'm winning." Jihoon felt a pang in his chest, a mix of admiration and guilt. He had never had to fight for anything in his life. He had always been given everything he wanted, everything he needed. But Sienna? She was fighting every day, with nothing but her own will to guide her. "Maybe we're not so different," Jihoon said quietly. "We're both running from something." Sienna raised an eyebrow, her expression softening. "And what are you running from, Jihoon?" He opened his mouth to answer, but the words felt too big to say. How could he explain the suffocating weight of his family's expectations, the feeling that he had been born into a life he never chose, that he was nothing more than a pawn in a game he didn't understand? How could he explain the fear that came with knowing that his every move was being watched, that one wrong step could destroy everything? "I'm running from my father," Jihoon said at last, his voice shaking slightly. "From the empire he built. From the life I've been forced to live." Sienna didn't respond right away. She just studied him, her eyes searching his face like she could see right into his soul. After a long moment, she finally spoke. "You don't have to keep running, Jihoon. You can stop. You can choose something else. You just have to decide that you're done with it." Jihoon looked at her, his heart hammering in his chest. She had no idea what she was asking. It wasn't that simple. There were consequences to every decision he made, and the consequences of leaving his family behind would be deadly. But Sienna wasn't asking him to make a decision in that moment. She was offering him something far more important, a way out. A way to break free from the chains that bound him to his father's world. A way to be something more than just a mafia heir. Before he could respond, his phone rang again. This time, it was his father's name flashing on the screen. Sienna glanced at the phone, then back at Jihoon. "You should answer it," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "You can't keep running forever." Jihoon stared at the phone, the anger and fear building inside him. He knew what this call meant. It was the call that would decide his fate. His father would demand answers. He would demand that Jihoon come back, that he fix everything, that he fall in line. But Jihoon didn't want to fall in line anymore. He didn't want to go back to the life he had been born into. He didn't want to be a part of the family business, the bloodshed, the lies. Sienna's eyes were on him, waiting for him to make a choice. And in that moment, Jihoon realized that he couldn't keep running. Not anymore. He had to decide what kind of man he wanted to be. With a steady hand, Jihoon reached for his phone, but instead of answering it, he turned it off. The weight of the decision felt like a mountain on his shoulders, but for the first time in his life, he didn't feel like he was drowning under it. "I'm done," Jihoon said quietly. "I'm done running." Sienna's expression softened, and for a moment, it felt like the world outside the diner had stopped. Like everything had come to a standstill. But the moment didn't last. The door to the diner opened with a loud creak, and two men in black suits walked in, their eyes scanning the room. They didn't look like regular customers. Jihoon's heart stopped, and a chill ran down his spine. "Jihoon Kim?" one of them asked, his voice cold and calculating. Jihoon's blood ran cold. He knew exactly who these men were. They weren't just anyone. They were sent by his father. And just like that, the life he had tried to leave behind had come for him. Subscribe to this channel to support our growth. Jihoon's heart was hammering in his chest as the two men in black suits approached him, their eyes locked onto him like predators closing in on their prey. The air in the diner seemed to grow thicker, as if the walls themselves were closing in around him. He could feel the weight of the moment, the crushing realization that his past had come to claim him. Sienna noticed the change in his demeanor immediately. She had been leaning against the counter, her hands clasped together, but now her posture stiffened. Her eyes flicked between Jihoon and the two men who had entered. "You're looking for me?" Jihoon's voice was calm, but inside, he was fighting a war. The sudden appearance of these men, the ominous presence they brought with them, it was a reminder that there was no escaping the life he had been born into. No matter how far he ran, it always found a way back to him. The man who spoke first was tall, his face cold, his eyes empty. "Jihoon Kim," he repeated, as if testing the name on his tongue. "We've been looking for you. Your father requests your immediate presence." Sienna shifted uncomfortably, her gaze darting between Jihoon and the two men. She could sense something far darker than she had imagined when she first met him. She had known there was more to Jihoon than the polished exterior, the expensive tuxedo, the confident smile. But she had no idea the depth of the danger he was tangled in. The way the men looked at him, the way their very presence seemed to stifle the air in the room, told her everything she needed to know. "Tell him I'm not going anywhere," Jihoon said, his voice low, more confident than he felt. He glanced at Sienna, and she saw the flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. But it was quickly masked by the steely resolve that had been a part of him for as long as she had known him. The taller man's lips curled into a tight smile, but it wasn't a smile of amusement. It was one of disdain. "I'm afraid you don't have much of a choice. You know the consequences of defying your father." Sienna felt a chill run down her spine. She had seen this kind of power before, but never in a man like Jihoon. She had heard rumors, whispers in the city about the Kim family, about how they controlled everything from businesses to politicians to the very streets they walked on. But this was personal. The coldness in the man's eyes, the way they seemed to be prepared for anything, it was more than just business. It was a threat. "Leave her out of this." Jihoon's voice was a low growl, his eyes narrowing as he focused on the men. His earlier calm was slipping, replaced by a quiet fury. But the man didn't flinch. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a black envelope. "Your father sent this," he said, holding it out to Jihoon. Jihoon hesitated, then took the envelope. His fingers brushed against the cold, smooth surface of the paper, and he knew without even opening it that it was a final demand. A command. One that he would have to obey, or suffer the consequences. His phone buzzed in his pocket again, and this time, it wasn't just a text from Hoon. It was from his father. The message was short and chilling. "You know what happens when you defy me. Come back, or there will be no going back." The words hit Jihoon like a physical blow. He stood there for a moment, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. His family. His legacy. Everything he had fought to escape. He could feel the walls closing in. His father had never given him a choice. And now, it seemed, neither did these men. "Take him," the man said to his companion. "We don't have time to waste." Sienna stepped forward, her eyes burning with determination. "No," she said, her voice trembling but strong. "You're not taking him anywhere." The men looked at her, as if she were an inconvenience, something to be swept aside. The taller man took a step toward her, his gaze hard. "Stay out of this, sweetheart," he sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." But Sienna didn't back down. She squared her shoulders, her chin lifted defiantly. "I don't care who you are," she said, her voice unwavering. "You're not taking him." Jihoon glanced at her, surprised. But before he could say anything, the man's expression turned colder, and he stepped closer to Sienna. "You don't know what you're getting yourself into," he warned. The atmosphere in the diner had changed completely. What had once been a quiet, almost peaceful space now felt charged with tension. Jihoon could feel his pulse quickening, the adrenaline flooding his system. The danger was real. This wasn't just a threat. These men were here to do whatever it took to get him back to his father. But something inside Jihoon shifted. Something had changed since he met Sienna. She had become a symbol of everything he wanted to fight for. He didn't know what it was about her. The way she didn't flinch when faced with danger, the way she had shown him a world outside of power and control. His life had been about power, about building an empire that could never be torn down. But now, with her standing beside him, he realized that maybe there was something more important than all of it. Something worth fighting for. "I'm not going anywhere," Jihoon said, his voice firm, despite the storm raging inside him. Sienna looked at him, her eyes filled with both fear and admiration. "Then we'll figure this out together," she said, her voice steady. The men didn't respond. They were clearly growing impatient, their hands twitching near the guns they kept hidden beneath their coats. Jihoon could feel the air in the room tighten, the danger more immediate now than ever before. But Sienna's presence, her determination, gave him strength. Jihoon stood his ground, the envelope still clutched in his hand. The weight of his decision pressed down on him. He had to choose, go back to the life his father had set for him, or fight for something he wasn't sure he even understood yet. The tension stretched between them like a taut wire, ready to snap. The men took another step forward, their eyes locked on Jihoon. And then, just as they were about to make their move, the sound of screeching tires cut through the air. The door to the diner slammed open, and Jihoon's eyes widened as a sleek black SUV pulled up outside. 2 more men, identical in their suits, stepped out. They were fast, efficient, like wolves hunting in a pack. One of the men outside shouted something in Korean, and the 2 men in the diner froze. Jihoon's heart skipped a beat. He recognized the voice, his father's personal enforcers, the family's most trusted soldiers. And they weren't here for small talk. "Time's up," the man who had been talking to Jihoon said, his voice filled with cold finality. "Come with us." Jihoon felt his stomach twist in knots. The walls were closing in. There was no escape now. Sienna stepped closer to him, her voice soft but firm. "Don't go, Jihoon. Not like this." Jihoon felt torn between the life he had fought to leave behind and the one he wanted to build with her. But he knew one thing. He couldn't keep running. He looked at her one last time, his heart aching. "I'm sorry," he whispered. And then, with a final glance at the men who had come to take him, Jihoon walked toward the door. But just as he reached the threshold, he heard a voice that would change everything. "Jihoon Kim," the man outside called. "You can't hide from your father forever. But you can run with us. And you won't be alone." Jihoon stopped. The words echoed in his mind. Run with them? Or run from everything he had ever known? Subscribe to this channel to support our growth. Jihoon stood frozen at the threshold of the diner, his heart pounding in his chest. The words the man outside had spoken were a challenge, a reminder of the world he had tried to leave behind. You can't hide from your father forever, but you can run with us. And you won't be alone. For a moment, everything seemed to pause. The noise of the diner, the clinking of dishes, the hum of the fluorescent lights, all faded into the background as Jihoon weighed his options. His father's empire, his duty, the life he had been groomed for since birth. And then there was Sienna. Jihoon turned slowly, looking over his shoulder at her. Her eyes were wide, her body tense, but there was no fear in her gaze. She wasn't afraid of what was coming. She wasn't afraid of him either. She was standing in front of him, waiting for him to make a choice, her hands nervously clutching the edge of the counter. "You don't have to do this," Sienna said, her voice steady, but filled with urgency. "You don't have to go back to that life. There's always another way, Jihoon. I know there is." But Jihoon knew the truth. There was no easy way out of this. Not for him. Not for anyone who had been born into the Kim family. His father's influence stretched far beyond the city, beyond countries, beyond borders. The weight of the empire was heavy on his shoulders, and the consequences of leaving it behind were never light. His father had made that clear. If Jihoon walked away, he would lose everything. His family, his fortune, his identity. And yet, as he looked at Sienna, standing there in her simple uniform, her eyes full of hope, he knew that the price of staying wasn't something he was willing to pay anymore. "Jihoon, please." Her voice broke through his thoughts, and he saw the way her hands trembled. "I don't want to see you lose yourself again. Don't go with them." The two men in black suits stepped forward, their presence like a dark cloud filling the small diner. They were the enforcers, the silent warriors who had come to drag him back into his father's world. Their faces were hard, emotionless masks that carried the weight of violence and obedience. But Jihoon couldn't move. Not yet. Sienna stepped closer, her voice a whisper now. "You don't have to go back. Not for them. Not for anyone." His heart ached with the truth of her words. How could he go back? How could he walk into the lion's den when everything inside him screamed to be free? One of the enforcers reached into his jacket, pulling out a gun. The cold metal gleamed under the harsh lights, and Jihoon felt a chill run down his spine. They weren't here for a simple conversation. This wasn't about negotiation anymore. The enforcer's voice was low and steady. "You're coming with us, Jihoon. Don't make this difficult." Jihoon's mind raced, but his body stayed rooted to the spot. He looked at the gun. He looked at the men who had been sent to drag him back into his father's empire. And then he looked at Sienna, standing there, her chest rising and falling in shallow breaths, her eyes filled with a kind of fear that he had never seen before. This was it, the moment that would decide everything. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him like a mountain. If he went with them, his life would be over. He would be a prisoner to the Mafia, just as his father had always intended. He would be a tool, a pawn in a game he never asked to play. But if he stayed here, if he fought against it, the consequences would be even worse. His father would not forgive this. But then he thought of Sienna, of the life they had barely begun to build, of the warmth she had brought into his world, of the way she had seen him for who he truly was, and not just the heir to an empire. "Jihoon," she whispered, reaching for his hand. "You can choose us. You can choose freedom. Please." The enforcer stepped closer, and Jihoon's gaze flicked back to him. The man's eyes were cold, unreadable, like a stone. And in that moment, everything became clear. Jihoon didn't care about the money, the power, or the empire. He didn't care about being the heir. He cared about the life he could have with Sienna. A life that was real, a life that wasn't controlled by fear or blood. "I'm done," Jihoon said, his voice firm. "I'm done with all of it. I'm not going back." Sienna's face softened, and she squeezed his hand. "I'm with you," she said. "I'll be with you, no matter what." Jihoon turned to face the enforcers, his decision final. "You're going to have to drag me back if you want me to go with you," he said, his voice laced with defiance. The enforcers exchanged glances. They weren't expecting this. They weren't expecting Jihoon to refuse. "You don't have a choice," one of them said, his voice colder now. "You're coming with us." Jihoon felt the tension in the air shift. This wasn't just about him walking away from his family anymore. It was about standing his ground, about taking control of his own fate. And as he stood there, face to face with the enforcers, something inside him hardened. "Let's see what happens if I don't," Jihoon said, his words cold as ice. The enforcer took a step forward, but before he could reach Jihoon, the door to the diner swung open again, and a man in a suit stepped inside. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and moved with the quiet precision of someone who had been trained for this. His eyes locked on Jihoon immediately, and something about him made the air feel even heavier. "Jihoon Kim," the man said, his voice low and commanding. "You're making a mistake." Jihoon's eyes narrowed. He didn't know this man, but there was something dangerous in the way he carried himself. The man didn't wait for a response. He turned to the enforcers, speaking to them as if they were children. Let him go. He's coming with me. The enforcers hesitated, confusion flickering in their eyes. Jihoon saw the uncertainty in their movements, the crack in their facade. Whoever this new man was, he was not someone they wanted to mess with. Sienna looked between Jihoon and the new man, her expression a mixture of fear and curiosity. Who is that? She whispered. Jihoon didn't answer right away. He didn't know who the man was, but he knew one thing. Things were about to get a whole lot more complicated. The new man glanced at Jihoon, a small smile tugging at his lips. You made your choice, Jihoon, he said, his tone calm and almost reassuring. But it's not over yet. Come with me if you want to survive. Jihoon felt a surge of adrenaline. He didn't know what was happening, but the fact that this man was here, at this very moment, made him realize that his life was changing in ways he couldn't understand yet. The enforcer stepped back, but not without a final look of warning. The man in the suit looked at them briefly and then turned back to Jihoon. Come on, the man said. We don't have much time. Jihoon didn't hesitate. He reached for Sienna's hand and pulled her with him. Whatever was coming next, he wasn't facing it alone. Subscribe to this channel to support our growth.